I decided I need to take time off.
You're listening to Glove Up or Shut Up on the Angry Marks Podcast Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the main event of the evening. All right, we're very happy that you decided to join us as we get tonight's Army of Pain started.
And welcome everybody to a special breaking news edition of Glove Up or Shut Up. My name is Peter H. I'm joined by my usual co-host from Omaha, Nebraska, Stevie J.
Yes, indeed, although nothing is going on in Omaha, Nebraska today that can compare to the press conference that's still taking place as we speak right now.
Well, actually, it's a media conference call that's happening. Dana White is in Sacramento for this weekend's UFC event.
Right, but the half of the call that's important is in Montreal where GSP is.
Yeah, he just got off the line, and he is on his way to a mall autograph signing as we speak. If you're in Canada and you're listening to this show, Sportsnet 360 had the live conference call. And they actually have cameras set up at the mall where GSP will be momentarily. And, quite the news indeed.
If we can take 1 second, Peter, I'll just say that for our people who haven't heard it or missed the call, I'm going to insert a little clip of it here. So here's what GSP had to say about his decision.
Been fighting for a long time. Had 22 fights in UFC. 15 of my fight is for a world title. I've been fighting a very long time for a high level. It's a lot of pressure, a lot of criticism, I decided I need to take time off, and I know the UFC is a business, and they can't wait for my little person, for sure. They have to keep things rolling. So I vacant my title.
George St-Pierre has vacated the Welterweight Championship, and he is taking a break from the sport. He is going to continue training, but he needs a break from competition.
He said the pressure of being the champion was just getting to be too much to bear, that everywhere he goes in public, people always have something to say to him, and every time he tries to take a break, it's all he can think about, and he just, for his own personal reasons, he needs to get away from it for a while. Yeah,
it's a few things we take away from what GSP said. Physically, he is 100% fine, 100% good to go. One day, when he feels like it, he might come back.
Mm-hmm. He didn't set a timetable. In fact, he was asked about a timetable, and he refused. He said that would put the pressure right back on him, and he doesn't want that. He'll come back when he decides.
So now we look at the other side of the coin. What does Dana White do with this big announcement? And it turns out March 15th at the American Airlines Arena in Dallas, Texas, Johnny Hendricks, the number 1 contender, will fight the number 3 contender, ruthless Robbie Lawler.
And as you said yourself to me a few minutes ago, if you're Carlos Condit, you're pissed.
Yep, and our friend of the show, Dave Meltzer, was on the conference call, and he did ask, what about Carlos Condit? And he said, Dana White said that he has something lined up for Condit on the same show. So expect to see Carlos Condit on the show March 15th. March 15th, Stevie, that card is going to be a packed show. This could be the first big show of the year, because not only do you have Johnny Hendricks and Robbie Lawler going for the title, you've also got John Jones defending the light heavyweight title against Glover Teixeira, and Carlos Condit on that same show, and Jake Shields and Hector Lombard.
And presumably, if they've got something lined up for Condit, quote unquote, that would probably be a number 1 contender match for the winner between Hendricks and Lawler.
There were 2 names that Meltzer did present to Dana White as possible fights, and he said, what about Matt Brown? And Dana said, no, we're going to go in a different direction.
Yeah, I think Matt Brown's herniated discs are going to prevent him from being in action anytime soon.
So the next name Meltzer brought up was Diaz. And Dana White very sheepishly said, as far as I know, Nick Diaz is still retired.
Yeah, so whatever they do, it probably isn't going to be one of those two. They're going to have to come up with something else, but we have to, in good faith, hope that they do come up with something for Condit, because he shouldn't be completely left out of the mix here.
Well, there is one fighter, the number 4 contender, and if this fight takes place, what a way to have a big show with a third big fight, Stevie, if you book Carlos Condit against Rory McDonald.
I suppose they could go that direction. It would be an interesting rematch. I just don't know. I feel like Rory McDonald has been exposed a little in his last fight. I'm not sure that this one turns out any better for him than when he fought Condit the first time.
Well, then the only 3 names I could see, if it's not McDonald and not Brown and Diaz, you gotta think Ellenberger, Maia, or Shields. And Shields is already on the card.
And Ellenberger's just got pulled out of that Singapore fight, so he's probably not ready by March.
So Damian Maia.
That would probably be it. That's about the only other name you could do.
So I'm going to stick by my prediction. I'm going to say Rory McDonald against Carlos Condit for the number 1 contendership. I could see that fight happening.
Mm-hmm.
But let's go back to Georges St-Pierre. Taking time off. He just took time off after UFC 167, defending his title against Johnny Hendricks in a very controversial fashion. Although both of us had it 48-47 for GSP, but we've already had that discussion. But it's one of those things where he just came back from a vacation in Dubai, and one very interesting point on the conference call, Georges St-Pierre said that he made this decision to walk away
before UFC 167.
Which, I mean, Dana White must be very, I'm not going to say pissed off, but I'm going to say that must have come as some shock to him.
Yeah, especially since in statements to the media all week long about this conference call, Dana had been downplaying it, saying he's not leaving, he's not going anywhere, he's still our man.
Exactly. But, I took, from what I heard from Georges St-Pierre, when I feel like it, if I feel like coming back, I will type of scenario. If you're saying if,
that's borderline to retirement.
Well, another reporter, and we've actually had this guy on our show, Ariel Hawani, said, "Are you retiring?" And he goes, "No, I'm taking a break." Like, he wouldn't give a percentage, he wouldn't give a number, because if you say, "I am coming back on this day," his brain is automatically going to start obsessing over June 15th or whatever it is.
Right.
So there's no date, there's no plans whatsoever.
This is like that whole thing I said before that TriStar didn't want to get out about him being so obsessive and not being able to let go of things. I think we're getting a hint of that from this conference call, that he's just so mentally motivated that when he gets a date and he has to defend the title, he can't let go and he can't unstress.
Yeah, but looking back at Georges St-Pierre's career, I'm looking at a live shot right now at the mall in Montreal where he's having his appearance. There are a lot of people at the mall waiting to see him, and a lot of cameras and media outlets there as well. So, be interesting to see how long he'll be at the mall today there. But looking back at his career, Stevie, do you think this is it? Do you think he's done?
It's hard to say. We're trying to analyze what's going on in his head, and this has been a source of speculation all week long leading up to this call, and we can only go based on what he said and draw inferences out of that, and what he said was, if I feel like coming back. So, if he does, can he still be competitive at the top level if he takes a year or two off? He may be very well of the fact that he can't compete if he takes 2 years off from the sport and other guys are rising up through the ranks and becoming as good or better than he was when he was in his prime. So the longer he's away, the less likely it is he's coming back.
Yeah, I mean, what's now, December 13th, Friday the 13th?
Some people are going to call this Black Friday.
Yeah, the hardcores will probably call it that, but I'm looking at Georges St-Pierre, and I'm looking at the time frame right now. He's 32 years old right now. He comes back, he'll be 30, like he's 32 now, so he'll be 33 in May. Let's say if he doesn't, I'm going to say this, if Georges St-Pierre does not announce a comeback by May, he's done. I think 33, put in a full training camp, he's going to be close to 34. And the thing about the announcement is, it isn't an interim title. He has dropped the title. He's no longer the UFC welterweight champion.
Yeah, effective immediately. The title is vacant until March.
If GSP wants to come back, I mean, maybe Lorenzo and Dana White will give him, the title shot automatically based on past merits. Or maybe they'll give him a fight or two to earn the title shot.
I almost think it would be the latter. I think they would send a message to GSP like, well, you did this to us by vacating the title, so if you want it back, you got to jump through some hoops.
Yeah, it's going to be one of those interesting things where, yeah, if he comes back, and I always say if now, if he comes back, obviously you got to get the ring rust off. You got to, have a fight or two in the cage and earn that title shot. Don't automatically give him a title shot. I mean, it's not fair to the rest of the division.
And he's no longer going to have the champion's advantage. People aren't going to look at him and go, well, he's already the champion, so in a close round, you could kind of lean towards giving it his way. If he's challenging for the title now, he's going to have to win every round decisively or finish his opponents. There's no more getting by on decisions if he comes back.
Yeah, and if you look at his record, the two losses on his record, one was from Matt Serra, one was Matt Hughes, and he admitted after the Matt Serra loss, his head wasn't in the game. He came back and dominated, hasn't lost since.
Right, but arguably, his head was not in the game with that Johnny Hendricks fight based on the fact that he was already thinking about retiring before that fight even took place. So his performance in that fight may now be considered a reflection of that.
Well, either way, Georges St-Pierre, you have to say Hall of Fame career if it is indeed over.
And in fact, biggest money draw in the history of UFC pay-per-view. I don't think they've ever had a more marketable star in or outside Canada than Georges St-Pierre.
Canada, I'd say the world.
Well, that's why I said biggest pay-per-view draw, because I think there are individual pay-per-views that have probably done better than shows where GSP has defended the title, like maybe UFC 100. But I think if you count every single pay-per-view he's headlined and add them all up together, he's been the single biggest box office draw they've had.
Oh, yeah. Bigger than Brock Lesnar, bigger than Randy Couture, bigger than Chuck Liddell, Tito Ortiz, bigger than everybody.
John Jones, Cain Velasquez, Ronda Rousey, the list goes on and on.
Yeah, absolutely. But he is beloved in Canada. I do know that he is up for nomination again this year for Canadian Athlete of the Year. Georges St-Pierre just took the stage at the Mall in Montreal wearing a Quebec Nordiques jersey.
Playing to the hometown crowd.
Well, they are in Quebec City, so.
Mm-hmm.
But, going back on his career, Hall of Fame, we talked about the box office appeal. Some people call him the Wayne Gretzky of mixed martial arts. Okay, I get that, but Wayne Gretzky isn't known in other parts of the world like Georges St-Pierre is.
Right, and Wayne Gretzky didn't stay in Canada for his entire career, so there may be some people who want to dispute it on that basis alone.
True, he did go to LA, St. Louis, and New York, but that's for a different thing. A lot of people, I'm seeing some feedback already on Twitter and Facebook, and there was a pro wrestling joke in here talking about how he lost his smile.
Oh boy, I suppose somebody had to make that joke at some point, but hey, I think personally, he's probably the only guy I've seen fight 3 times at 3 different events. I saw him the first UFC I ever went to, UFC 74. I saw him again at 87 when he defended against John Fitch, and you and I saw him at 124 in Montreal, so there are not many fighters I could say I've seen fight 3 times on 3 different cards in 3 different places. And Georges St-Pierre, I guess that proves he's a box office draw, that I've gone to see him fight that many times in that many locations.
Yeah, going back to my point, I do know that he is nominated again this year for Canadian Male Athlete of the Year. I don't know if he'll win or not, but I know he is nominated again for, I think the 6th or 7th straight year.
How many times has he won it in those years? All of them?
No, I don't think he won. I'll check my research here, but I know he's won it a few times, but not recently.
Okay. But that just proves his enduring popularity to be nominated that many times in a row. Yeah,
no, I mean, he is, when you think of male athletes in Canada, if you don't play hockey or, are an Olympic gold medalist, it's going to be pretty hard for you to win.
Mm-hmm. And like case in point here, we talked about Rory McDonald earlier. For him to achieve that kind of popularity, he'd have to be the champion and be a fighter for just as long as GSP had, because it took GSP a long time to get to that ascendance of the top.
Oh yeah.
Even if Rory McDonald suddenly became UFC champion tomorrow, he would still need a long time to become that popular in Canada, let alone the US.
Absolutely. I mean, you said before, like, you've seen him 3 different times, but when you saw him, Stevie, those are 3 different evolutions of Georges St-Pierre. He's always evolving with every fight he's had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's completely different. The thing that really made me a fan of his the first time I saw him fight live was the fact that he was going up against a highly regarded wrestler in Josh Koscheck, who people thought had the best takedowns in UFC at the time. And I watched for 3 straight rounds GSP just tumble this guy with wrestling, just completely take him apart. And I was like, this guy was supposed to be the best in the world in UFC at wrestling, and GSP just proved he's a better wrestler and had never done a day of collegiate wrestling in his life. That was what made me a GSP fan, was just seeing the way he utterly dominated Josh Koscheck on the mat.
He, looking at his awards, he was the Rogers Sportsnet Canadian Athlete of the Year in 2008, 09, and 2010.
Well, yeah, 3 straight years. That's an accomplishment, and to be nominated 6 years after that, it's like 6 years total, 3 years in a row winning. That's a hell of a thing.
Absolutely. But, he does have other, avenues he can go into. He, will be in the release next year of Captain America, the Winter Soldier. He plays Batroc the Leaper.
Mm-hmm.
And, he also was in, Death Warrior. He played Shaman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that might be what fills his time now. If he's going to find other things to do that'll keep his interest and help him make some money while he's outside of UFC, he's probably going to do more movies and TV show appearances. And hey, he's already marketable. He's made his name and gotten worldwide fame, so he might as well use that to his advantage and do all the media that he can do.
And of course, here in Canada, he can just walk into RDS and get a job right away as a UFC color commentator.
Yeah, if that's what he wanted, he could surely do that.
He also holds the record for most victories inside the octagon with 19. No one else can say that.
And most title defenses too, right?
I think him and Silva are pretty neck and neck on that one.
Yeah, well, Silva lost the title, so.
That's true. 8 times against Diaz, 9 against... Yep. Yeah, pretty much. So, looking back at this announcement today, Stevie, I've asked this before, like, do you think this hurts the welterweight division, or do you think now with Hendricks and Lawler fighting for the title, is there like a feeling of a new wave, a new blood almost being transfused into the division?
It's hard to say how long it's going to take before we know what the real ramifications of this are. I mean, it might be seen by some observers that anybody who becomes the champion after GSP didn't have to beat GSP for the title, and that, they always use this term in boxing, and it's not a term that I'm a huge fan of, but I'll throw it out here. The lineal champion. That whoever is the champion beat the champion, and whoever that champion was beat the champion before him. That there's a lineal title. And some people will look at this and say that the welterweight champion is not a lineal champion because nobody beat Georges St-Pierre for the title. And of course we'll have the people like Big D who say that he did beat GSP for the title, he just got robbed by the judges. So if Hendricks becomes the champion in his fight with Lawler, some people will think of that as being lineal. Whether it truly is or not is debatable. I think the bigger concern here would be not whether it affects the future of the welterweight division, but how it affects UFC in terms of box office, because again, we've said this already, GSP will go down as the biggest box office draw they ever had, and people like Johnny Hendricks, I don't know if he's going to be the box office draw that GSP was.
Well, I think when it comes to people in the welterweight division, if you're just looking at that by itself, Rory McDonald, if he, climbs the ranks as it were, I'm not saying he's, like some people call him the next GSP, but I think it is marketable as someone to fill into GSP's shoes if this is the end of GSP. He could be the next Canadian fighter to, hit that top of the division and to put, the marketing vehicle behind as well.
Maybe in Canada, but I'm not convinced that Rory McDonald has the crossover appeal, because the thing that made GSP such a draw, not just in Canada but around the world, was that he has a very unique charisma in the way that he speaks, in his no-nonsense demeanor, which is very likable and makes you smile every time he says something serious. It's hard to not be a fan of GSP unless you're just absolutely sick of him reigning as champion and thinks that he cheated to be state champion or be champion. There are conspiracy theorists out there, but he's a very likable fellow. I don't see that in Rory McDonald. I don't hate Rory McDonald, but I don't think he's the charmer that GSP is.
Yeah. It's,
honestly, Johnny Hendricks has a better chance at that than GSP, because people do love Johnny Hendricks.
Well, just taking us outside of the division, the charismatic, box office appeal, outside of John Jones, I mean, who is there right now to take up the next, big draw for the UFC?
It's a damn good question, because they want it to be Cain Velasquez, and it hasn't quite materialized to the degree that they've hoped. And they obviously want it to be Ronda Rousey, but some people are still a little skeptical of the women's division, and they still haven't fully embraced it. So it's going to take more time of her being a champion for more dominant fights before people really get behind her to make her a box office draw.
Yeah.
So the smaller weight divisions, the case in point is being made by the fact that Demetrius Johnson and Joseph Benavidez are on free TV this weekend. If they were considered top pay-per-view draws right now and box office money, they would be headlining a UFC numbered pay-per-view.
Yeah, if this scenario happened where Demetrius Johnson, they wanted to take an immediate leave of absence, there wouldn't be it wouldn't be streamed live on TV nationwide in the States.
No, sadly that's true, and I have the world of respect for the guy, but he's not considered money to the degree that GSP is.
Cain Velasquez, maybe in California.
Maybe in the Mexican demographic, but he hasn't quite reached that broad stream yet.
Yeah, well, we're going to wait and see how long this takes for Georges St-Pierre. This could be the end. It could be 6 months. But I'll predict if he doesn't hear anything back from May, then he's not coming back. That's my prediction.
Yeah, he can't afford to take more than a year off. If he does, it's going to be a significant problem for him trying to stay competitive coming back.
And as you always say, there's a lot of tread on those tires.
Yeah, especially after that Hendricks fight. That probably wore more tread off than any fight he's ever had.
Exactly. Well, that's going to do it for the breaking news edition of Glow Up or Shut Up. Don't forget to tune in this Wednesday where we'll be reviewing what happens this Saturday between Demetrius Johnson and Joseph Benavidez.
Yes, we'll have all the details from that fight, which should hopefully be an exciting card.
All right, so for CVJ, I'm Peter H., the Hardcore Canadian. Thanks for listening, and as I always say, never leave it to the judges. We'll see you.